Hello, hello, people. We are thrilled to have you with us today. We're just going to give some folks time to come on in. Welcome, welcome to this webinar. We know we've got a great crowd coming today, so we'll just give it a minute for everyone to get in the virtual room. Welcome, welcome. Love seeing the numbers climb. Hello, Bill. Thank you for saying hello.
Hi, Bill.
Yeah, feel free to introduce yourself if you'd like. There's the chat, which everybody's probably quite familiar with, and there's another tool that you can also access that's called Q&A. And the benefit of the Q&A is that if you answer a question in Q&A, the answer of that question from myself or Heather will actually line up with your question. You don't have to sort of scroll down and try to figure out who's answering whose question. So if you find the Q&A tool in your menu bar, that will be great. Hi, Corinne. Good to see you.
I see so many friends, names popping in there. I can't see you physically, but I'm glad you're here. Thanks for joining.
Hi, Karen. Hi, Jenny. Great to see you. All right, we're just going to give our room just a couple minutes to populate, and then we will jump in. So good to see so many familiar names.
And from all over the country. Yay. Great diversity here.
Fantastic. All right, we'll just give it one more minute and then we are ready to go. See just a couple other folks come in. All right, why don't we call it? And this webinar is being recorded. Following today, probably tomorrow, you'll receive an email from us with thanking you for being here. And if you registered or a colleague of yours registered and wasn't able to be here, they will also receive the email with a recording to it. So team members who weren't able to attend live and in person can still have access to it. And feel free to share that with other folks as well. We really want everybody to have access to this great conversation. So that was not supposed to happen. Sorry.
You're a busy woman, Romayne.
Apparently. For all the meetings I have later today. All right, well, let's go. Welcome, welcome. Good afternoon. I think everybody's in an afternoon time zone. The purpose of today's webinar is to explore the critical intersection of brand strategy and enrollment strategy. And I couldn't be more excited to take on this topic today with Heather. The conversation is designed to really help you appreciate the synergies and the practical applications of intertwining both the work that your enrollment team does and the strategies that you employ in enrollment strategy, and the work that your communications team does around brand strategy, and really understanding that those are bodies of work that need to happen and need to be intertwined and very much exist hand in hand. So that's our goal today, is to kind of walk through and help you recognize what some of those synergies are. And we're going to kind of take you step by step through an admissions funnel process, just to kind of give you that context. So for those of you I haven't had the privilege or opportunity of meeting before, my name is Romayne Levee. I'm a partner at Mission Minded and the Director of Strategy. My background is in the corporate world of branding and strategic planning for a couple of decades or so, and a founder of an independent school called Vistamar School in Los Angeles, California. I was the founding board chair, sat on the board of that school for a dozen years and did all the things that a founder and a board chair does, including sweeping floors and writing strategy and everything in between. I'm also a trustee at Lewis and Clark College in Portland, Oregon. So absolutely love working with schools and colleges and doing this kind of work. And I could not be more thrilled to introduce Heather, who I think many of you probably already know. But Heather, tell us a little bit about yourself.
It's great to be here. Hi, everyone. Heather Hoerle. I'm in my 13th year at the Enrollment Management Association. I'll be going out on my 14th year. So I'm finishing up and retiring next summer. And before that, I was working in associations largely, but spent a little bit of time, 5 years, in working in our schools at my alma mater, Westtown School, and at George School, where my daughter attended much later. I am utterly devoted to independent schools. I'm a graduate and my life was changed. I was a financial aid kid who feels strongly about paying it back now. And then through my 3 years in boarding at Westtown, I pursued, education, but very quickly came back into the world of independent schools and worked as an admission officer, worked as a dean, the triple threat in boarding schools, and then eventually found my way into association work, which I've always loved. And I've been in our space for about 40 years. So lots of experiences to call upon during this presentation. I'll try to make them relevant to your experience today because marketing has certainly changed enormously. I used to teach marketing back in the 90s, and boy, today's marketing is quite different than those years, but the basic concepts remain the same. So we're going to talk a bit about that and about enrollment strategies intersection with brand marketing. Oh, by the way, I'm a client of Mission Minded too, and we'll talk about that during the presentation.
Thank you
what
for
I
saying
learned.
that. I definitely am glad you hit that. I feel like I want to change my answer to say I also an independent kid, independent school kid, went my entire life to independent schools, and that's what inspired me to want to create one because of that great experience. So I share that with you, that bond, Heather. Glad you share that. For those of you who are new to Mission Minded, just want to tell you a couple things about who we are and put this work in context. We are a strategy and creative firm that helps good causes have greater impact. And we believe that the independent schools, like all of you are a part of, that make the world better, need to be just unapologetically bold about their vision and crystal clear about how you achieve it. We were founded because we saw a problem in the nonprofit and independent school sector, which was that despite incredibly well-trained staff and in well-intentioned volunteers, schools struggle to articulate who they are and what's distinctive about them vis-a-vis other schools in their market. And this gets in the way of helping schools reach their enrollment goals. If families don't understand who you are or why you matter or how you're distinctive, they are less likely to check you out, to inquire, to visit, to apply, and all of those things. So attracting more families happens when you have bold and distinctive and clear resonant messages. And that starts with a clear brand strategy for your school and then trickles down to all of those other signals. I'm going to share with you just a teeny bit about some methodology that might be familiar to a couple of you if you've ever had a chance to work with Mission Minded. We have created a product or a tool that we call the brand equation and another one called the minute message model. And both of those are features of our work. The benefit of both of those is that they help schools articulate their vision and impact through really clear signals and really compelling messages. And so in our work with schools around the country, hundreds of them in the 22 years that we've been around, developing brand strategies or school messages or capital campaigns or strategic plans. I can't tell you the number of times that we have heard from a client 1 year later, 2 years later, 3 years later, just gushing about how the work has translated into impact, how the investment that they have made in being very strategic about their brands, they're being very, very bold in how they articulate those strategic commitments for their school, has come back and doubled or tripled or even quadrupled the small investment that they made in the work. And so a month ago, I actually co-hosted a webinar with one of our former clients, Alice Dickherber from Villa Deschênes School. I don't know if a few of you might have been there. They are 3 years out from their brand refresh, and she shared that the school has had a 15% increase in enrollment in the third year since articulating a brand strategy and getting crystal clear about their messages. So to say in that case, the investment paid off is an understatement. They have weight pools at every grade, and I have stories to share from schools that we've worked who have seen those kinds of increases, whether they're in inquiries or applications or yield Those are the kinds of outcomes that you can expect if you just do this work with great intention. And by the way, I'm saying that all just to encourage you to do this work. A lot of schools do this work in-house, and without the work, the help of a consultant. Of course, we love having the opportunity to do that work with schools, but doing the work is what's critical, is just getting clear about who you are. So that's a little bit about mission-minded. And the love that the work that we love to do with independent schools, and talking about working and loving independent schools. Heather, tell us, what does EMA do and what are you all up to these days?
Well, first of all, I mentioned that we were a client of Mission Minded, and the name Enrollment Management Association came from marketing work and brand work we did with Mission Minded back in 2014, 2015, 2016, when we rolled out the new name. Before that, our name was SSATB, and no one could remember what it all stood for. But we did a lot of clarifying work with Mission Minded to better understand who we were, who we wanted to show up as. And as part of that work, we took on this name. And I just remember the night before the sort of big announcement of the new name, I was sick to my stomach, worried that people would be so unhappy that we were changing the name. There's long history with the acronym. But the great news is that when we rolled things out, Jenny Winton, a part of Mission Minded, said, Heather, it's going to be fine. Just hang tight. It's going to be fine. Sure enough, it was. People sent nice messages, but the real impact was a month later when we held our annual conference. First of all, about 100 extra people came to that conference. And then we were rolling out the visual branding to go with the messaging. And from that point on, growth took off for us as well. Up until the pandemic, we were in major growth mode at Enrollment Management Association. Well, we don't need to talk about the pandemic years, but Enrollment Management Association now serves 1,200 independent schools, both in the United States and around the world. And our message is this: we believe that admission practices of the past will not sustain independent schools of the future. So every day we serve enrollment leaders with the best science, research, and training, because when great schools enroll great students, everything's possible. And yes, that was the mission-minded work in action. The tool that we used is the same tool you just heard Romayne speaking to. And the other thing you probably all know now is that EMA and ERB are about to join together and merge. And this has been percolating over several months. It's been a long conversation. Actually, I went back into our board books, happening well before I arrived. So this was an idea that the time finally came, and it actually connected to our current strategic plan. I want to make that point, that we were open to transformational strategic partnerships. This is becoming just that. And we're excited. There'll be a new name. EMA will go away and there'll be a new name. We're calling ourselves New Org for the time being, but just watch for the new branding there. And we certainly hope all of you will continue to be part of our world. And then I just wanted to drop this in because for those of you who are close to EMA's work, this is a sort of strategic framework to use to educate people inside your schools and to remember. I tell everybody to sort of laminate this and put it at your desk, because we spend so much time in the gray area to the right, the selecting and onboarding of new students, the admission work. But in strategic enrollment management is really incorporating all of these pieces. And we're going to talk mostly today about admission work, and that's fine. Admission is a critical part. It's a hard part of the work. But in leading enrollment management, you're trying to integrate a tuition and finance strategy, marketing strategy. And notice on the outside, we put mission and brand together because we believe they're deeply intertwined, and you have to be distinctive in both, to Romayne's earlier point, so that you differentiate yourself in your market. And I think schools struggle particularly with this aspect of telling their story well and speaking to what's special about you and how you're going to fit the needs of a family. So we'll dig into some of research that we have to that point as we go through this.
Great. Thanks, Heather. So Heather and I thought it would be a good idea, before we jump into talking about how these bodies of work intertwine, to let's just stop and define what is brand strategy, what is enrollment strategy. At its core, brand strategy is the intentional communication of the identity and the values and the promise of your school. You have a reputation already as a school. And brand strategy is putting intentionality around setting what you want your reputation to be. You do have some control with the messages you share and that you project about who you are and what you stand for and why you're important. So that's the work of brand strategy, is the intentionality around setting and making those decisions. Tell us about what's enrollment strategy.
Very much the same way. It is really an approach to meeting families where they are, as you want to attract them into knowing about your school. You want to engage them in a process, guide them into your school, and hopefully admit them. And then the other part of that is the retention of the families all the way through to graduation. And some connect the advancement work and think about almost the lifetime customer, if you will. But in our world, we talk about enrollment, the cycle all the way through graduation. Again, today we're talking specifically about the admission cycle and research inside of that. But effective enrollment strategy, really, if you're doing a lot of research about the effectiveness of your work, you're going to look at all those students you've admitted every year to say, who's not making it? Who doesn't get to the end? And how does that affect our selection process? It's kind of a virtuous circle.
Yeah, great, thank you. So Heather and I decided to use this as our agenda. We're going to talk in 4 pieces. One is about what's the role of brand strategy and enrollment strategy when we are creating awareness of our schools among families. What is the role of those 2 things when people are starting to take an interest and we're creating interest and building interest? What is the role of brand and enrollment strategy when people are really starting to build a sense of appreciation for who you are and we're trying to create desire for your school, and then ultimately the action that we want them to take. I'm sure everyone on this webinar today knows what the outcomes we are hoping to attract people to our schools, families and students who are mission aligned and values aligned. And once we determine that they would be successful in our community, we want them to join our communities and take the action and enroll. So, and as Heather said, and re-enroll. So we're going to use this as our agenda. Heather and I are going to bounce back and forth talking about some of the things to think about at each of these phases of the funnel, if you will. So let's start with the awareness phase. When the goal for schools is for families to become aware of us and to begin forming some initial impressions about who you are, what you care about, and what you do. Most often, this is happening through word of mouth, word on the street. You're on the side of a soccer field and you overhear a conversation and a name comes up and like, ooh, I think I want to know more about that. That's your first impression. And that's how awareness is getting built. So let's talk about some of the tools and some of the strategies that you want to be thinking about. I'll start just thinking about brand strategy. You want that positioning to be set. You want the things that people say on the sideline of that soccer field to be resonant. You want the things that they say about you to stand out and to not blur into a description that sounds just like any other school that they might be talking about. So you want to be setting that position internally as a strategic initiative with, your staff and board and really agreeing on what those key ideas are. And then you want to be articulating that unique idea through everything you do so that when that person gets to talk about you on the side of that field, it's been informed by something you put out there and not something they came up with on their own. Building emotional resonance is what you're trying to do. You're trying to start to sow the seeds of them hearing something and being interested in it. I'm going to introduce you to something that is called the minute message model. When I mentioned mission-minded and our reason for being and some of the core products and services that we offer to schools, this is one of them. And the idea of it is that you should not be able to say everything about your school in a minute, but that you should know what are the most important things to say if you only had a minute, and then what are the next important things to say, and so on and so forth. So the way the minute message, that is a mouthful. The way the minute message model works is it's almost counterintuitive to how most of us describe our schools today. When people ask us about our schools, we would say, the grades we serve or where we're located or whether we're single sex or co-ed, or maybe we're progressive or traditional or experiential. We'd throw out some kind of jargony phrase. which is a detail and a feature of our school. And the minute message model teaches us not to do that. It says to do the exact opposite, to start with a bigger idea and flip the script and start with something that's compelling and kind of bigger picture. It's a big idea. It's a distinctive idea. Hook your listener, hook your reader to, I like that idea. I want to hear more about it. And eventually you'll work your way to those details as proof points. So that's how the minute message model works. When you're building awareness for your school, you're really thinking about a message that is very high level and what we call a belief message at Mission Minded. So you see the little arrow is kind of flagging to that first message that you might tell about the school. It really is in the awareness building phase. You're going to be building comprehension for that big, bold, and distinctive idea about your school, and not much more than that. So that looks like a statement that says, we believe such and such, so we do such and such, and because. And both Heather and I used belief messages today when we introduced our respective organizations. So that's what you want to be doing at the awareness building phase, is high level, resonant concept. You want people to be hearing and reading your belief message. You want people in your community to be using it, as well as Heather did just now, as a standout graduate of Mission Minded
Well, this is a fun thing to do actually with groups of people in your school, because, we did it internally, and the answers that came back initially were not all the same, of course. But by doing it, it provoked really great discussion that got us to the admission practices of the past will not sustain independent schools of the future. So it's a great exercise to do internally to help you come up with just that point. What do you really believe?
It's
And
the
what do you
hardest
stand
thing
for?
to do. It's the hardest thing to do, but when you get there, you
When
love
you
it. And
get there, it's so
everybody will.
exciting.
Yeah.
Yes.
So here's a quick one I just want to show you for a school client, because Mission Minded and EMA, or neither of us are schools. Here's one for a school that Mission Minded worked with in Annapolis called Severn School. It sits right on the homepage of their website, and it says, at Severn School, we believe there are many ways to lead, but that every student has the potential to be exceptional. So that's what they believe. And every day our teachers model what it means for students to lean into academic challenges, step into personal growth, and have the tough conversations needed to enact social change. Because when we define leadership by the positive impact we have on others, we become the empathetic, dynamic individuals on which our world depends. Are you hearing an idea about this school? I saw the word many ways to lead. I saw a phrase that says, when we define leadership by, and there was like a different way of thinking about leadership. I'm picking up on an idea here that this school has something to do and say and think and believe about what it means to lead in the 21st century. That's what I want to do at the awareness phases. I want to create a high level concept and an understanding about what this school is. And I want people to repeat that. Whether they get the exact words right, that's what I want people repeating on the side of that soccer field.
And it's provocative too. I love the note that it's like many ways to lead. Well, what does that mean? Like, what do they mean by that? Tell me more, right? Yeah.
All right, so we're going to switch over and thinking about some of the strategies
Yeah.
that are happening in Heather's world in
Yeah.
awareness
I
phase.
mean, all of you do this work, and I don't want to, read line by line, but of course, this is sometimes the hardest part of our work, because for years, I think we were many of us, at least back in my day, we were gatekeepers waiting for the calls and maybe letters back in my day to come in. But today, I think increasingly we have to get smarter and smarter about how to build the top of our funnels. And you can do everything from direct mail outreach. Many of you use our student prospect list. Those are names of students that have agreed to hear from you. Search engine optimization. Many of you are doing much better digital marketing than I could have ever imagined back in my career. And advertising that really works for you. And all of those things, I think, and Romayne, you could probably confirm this, but I heard long ago in some marketing class that like 12 touches before anybody takes action. Maybe it's more now in this crazy world in which we live, where there's so much incoming information. And, we've done research, and there was a link on the last slide that was the Ride to Independent Schools. It's about a year old now. 10 or more says, oh, yeah, thank you, mission minded. Okay. And what we did is we wanted to know what the motivating factors were for families and why they were looking at our schools. And guess what? It's been the same answer every time we've done this research. We've done it now 4 times during my tenure. And it's the issue of high quality academic programs. Now, what does that mean? Well, that's where you have to lean in as schools and define what high quality means to your school. and find the right parent group that's going to match with your definition. When we have another research report we do every year called the State of the Industry, or the SOTI. And we asked our admission folks, well, what do you think are the motivating factors for families? Look at where admission folks answered. You can see there's a little disconnect. And I think this is where I would just point to your attention that I've often visited our school's websites if I'm consulting or talking to a school, and I don't see a lot about the high quality admission program or our academic program. And I would tell you, make sure you are clear about that early on with families. And that could be your belief statement, as we just looked at the Severn School. So definitely have an answer to that question. People want all of it, let's be clear, but there's on too many websites not enough information about what makes your school better than free. And so please answer that question, and in every way you can, with your unique offering, with exactly what you do differently than the free offering down the school. I think that's really important to families, because they will be paying for this, most of them. So, and we also ask families, why aren't you? What's driving this motivation? What are the dissatisfaction pieces? And of course, it's the academic program again at their current school. Also, people want more. They want more beyond the academic program. You can see everything from extracurriculars to individualized attention. All these things are things you can point out to in your admission program and strategy. But again, if you're not immediately bringing up the issues around academics with families as you begin to interact with them, that's what they want to talk about first. It may not be why you land them eventually, but they want to start there. And so meet them where they are, because that's what they're telling us is the most important reason they're showing up anyway. So the key takeaways are, the family is going to, our research shows that as you go through the funnel, as you're getting closer to the application and the enrollment decision, et cetera, things start changing and shifting a bit as to what matters most to families. But at the beginning, they want you focusing on that high quality academic program issue. In lower schools, they also frequently list this love of learning, and they want to know about your diversity, equity, inclusion issues and what you're doing in that space. But as upper grades come along, none of you'll be surprised to hear this: college placement, the cost, how are they going to manage the financial aspects of being part of your program, and athletics play increasingly more of a role in what will drive them into your school. And particularly in boarding schools, athletics rise up the ladder a bit. So make sure, again, you are addressing all of that quickly as they come to visit your website and get to learn more about you in your marketing materials.
Thanks, Heather. I think just to put the punctuation mark on that. So those are all the things that you absolutely must project and communicate that your school offers. And my angle of it is, and you need to do it in a distinctive way, because to put out the list of, oh, yes, we have college placement. Oh, yes, we have. Oh, yes, we have. You're basically swimming in the sea of independent schools who are all saying those same exact things, right? So what's your version of that? What is the outcome? What is the reason that your school needs to be here versus the school down the street that Heather referenced that is probably has a great program as well and doing a lot of those things well.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to move now to the next rung down the funnel, which we're calling the interest phase. And the goal here for schools is for families to begin learning more about us. Typically, this is going to be research that they're doing online. Maybe it's a few more conversations that they're having with folks whose kids went to your school or alumnus of your school. They're doing research on websites. They're on your website. They're probably starting to check out your social media, and they're also looking at online rankings and reviews. The good news is you get to control a good portion of that. You have 100% control over your own website and your own channels. You have limited control over reviews and rankings, but you do have the ability to have your families put reviews for your school, and you want to have them use language that you know is important. So if you are asking people to do you that favor, go so far as to ask them or help them know what you want to project in those messages. The key things to think about in the brand strategy realm when we're generating interest or the interest phase. is ensuring that there's consistency. You can't have lots of things out there that are looking different, feeling different, saying different things. So ensuring all of your touch points are on in line with your values, and maintaining consistency across every social media channel and all of your digital campaigns, that they're laddering up to a bigger idea. I'm going to introduce this idea that's called a problem message framework. I showed you this a second ago, where in the minute message model, when we were building awareness for the school, we were talking sort of high level about a belief message, which gave me a high level understanding of who you are and what was different about you. Now you're kind of progressing the conversation down the chain a little bit, because they're starting to form interest. And now the job of your messages is to explain why that big idea matters to them. Give them some context. You know who does a really great job of this is girls' schools. They explain what happens for girls in a co-ed environment. That's called a problem message. If you don't know it, you're telling somebody, if you don't do this, this is what is going on. And if you do that in a leaderful way, in a credible, sort of authoritative way, they are hearing you as an expert and you know what you're doing. And yes, that's a problem. And I didn't really know it was, but now that you've told me it is, I want to trust you and go farther down with you in this conversation. So I'm going to show you an example of this done well by Severn School. Again, that was the school that I just shared the belief message. And I want to point out how this social media post begins with a thought leadership idea. It puts in the minds of the reader. Hopefully you can all read this. It says leadership is more about leadership today is more than taking center stage. It's about agility. It's about wellness. It's about deep listening. And at Severn, our students lead by fostering connection and unlocking the power of the collective. This is a post about a pizza party that Doug Lagarde had for the sixth graders that were able to come into his office on day one and tell him the names of every kid in their class. This could have just as easily been a picture of kids eating pizza, and it could have said, today the sixth graders had a pizza party with Mr. Lagarde because, whatever. But to start with that idea about what this school thinks about leadership, and what the new definition is for leadership, and then connecting that to why this mattered. Why was it important that these kids all knew each other's names? Because that's how you unleash the power of the collective, by knowing each other and listening to each other and connecting. So brilliant job of tying a problem message framework to an everyday event that happened at Severn School. And my hope is that you do this in every post, that it's not just, hey, what a great shot of our students on this field trip today or whatnot, this thing happening in class, but you're tying it back to that bigger reason that you have for being, which is
I love that top line, more than taking center stage. I have an introverted child, and I immediately know there's a place where she would be comfortable, because it's not just about the kids are not just going to be the center stage kids, right? Fantastic. Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah, a few points from the admission perspective. First of all, make sure your website is put together in a way for easy access. Don't make people hunt and peck and click 10 times to get to what they need. We already talked the last round in what they want to hear from you about your distinctive program, your distinctive high quality program, whatever that means to your school. Definitely track what's going on your website. Make sure you understand what people are consuming and what their behavior patterns are. And are you calling them to action in the critical places that you can grab them? They're not just going to be sleuthing on your website. And then please, one of the big takeaways from the RIDE research is the personalized follow-up and the personalized connections that these families have with our staff make all the difference. And we're going to look at some more examples of this in the research. But, the really important thing to know is as they are going to apply and then where they decide to enroll, the students have greater decision-making now than ever before. These numbers keep growing in this research that we do. When I first started, I think it was in the 60s and 70s on an application, where's my child going to apply? Now we're up to over 80% are involved. The kids are involved in deciding to a very great extent or to a great extent. So your target is the child as much as it is the parent. Remember that in your marketing. have two plans, because parents may want to hear different things than students. This is just another example. You can dig in. There's a little bit. There's an axis for the decision on where students apply and what percentages, and the other axis is where the decision is to enroll. And really significant growth for the student making a big part of the decision. So that changes actually how your marketing messages should be tailored, because you're talking to both parents and to students. A framework that's, I think, a lot of schools have taken heart is the NAS Jobs to be Done. It's linked on this PowerPoint, so you can click right through and learn about it if you don't know. And they've basically identified 4 personas, and their framework is parents are hiring us to do a job for them. And our schools must be aware of the jobs they want us to get done for them and for their children in order to communicate well with them. Also know that, both, this is a tangled web. Both parents and students are in conversation together. It's unlikely, if you're not talking to both of them, they're both going to make this decision together. And so don't go down the rabbit hole of just reaching out to one or the other. It's a joint effort. And then I would also say, again, if you read the full RIDE report, you'll understand that as you go through each phase of the journey, different things start bubbling up. In the beginning, you don't have to spend too much time on financial issues, but as they get closer and closer to the application and final decision, you have to address, even with incredibly wealthy family, the financial aspects of being part of your community.
Yeah, great. I just punctuation mark on the social media and the students being part of the target. That Severn post, I think, was a Facebook post or Instagram. And we know that kids are spending more hours on their time on other platforms now, like TikTok. If your school isn't on TikTok with an intentional strategy to be delivering those on-brand messages, but in the environments where children or students are looking, they may not be following you, but you might come up on their feed somehow. So think about the environment if you aren't already.
And I would say pay attention too, because unauthorized TikTok that might be tagging your school, there may be things there you don't want to see. I know there was a lawsuit 2 years ago just on this very topic. So don't be that school.
Yeah, true. All right, let's move into the desire phase. And this is where the goal is for schools, is for the families to be starting to experience the school firsthand, and starting to build and solidify an emotional connection with your school. They've heard a lot about you. They've been on your site. They've seen and read and visited conversations with people, but here they are now in your campus. Typically, this is controlled environments where you're guiding them on a tour. It's an open house. It's a shadow day. It's a revisit day. I know there's some vulnerability or risk with shadow days, but depending on the student that you pair them with, but hopefully those are well selected. But this is your opportunity to really, at this stage, to be ensuring that all of those controlled environments are just that your tour guides are using the right brand language, that they are on their tour, they are pointing out the benefits of your campus spaces and not here's our lab or here's our gym, but here's what happens in this lab and why that matters and how that ladders up to that bigger idea that I told you about earlier. That your community members are showing up on brand. And what I mean by that is if your big idea for your school is about you're a creative place, then you want your people to show up creative, the way that they act and dress, and that they have maybe some flexibility in what they're doing with their program or their tour. You want those ideas to come across if you set intentionality around something like, I'm using creativity as an example, but you really want to make sure your community members are acting on brand as well. So when it comes to the kind of messages that you are creating, I'm going to flip back to our handy little message structure. And so now this yellow arrow has moved to what we call an impact message. And essentially what you're doing here now when you're building emotional connections with people is you are telling them stories about your school, about students, about teachers, about families, families about alumni. And you're doing so in a very selective way. You're telling them a story you know is going to resonate with them because you know who they are and you know why you paired them with such and such a family or a tour guide or a student, right? So you're selecting the stories that you want to tell that you know are going to resonate. Do you remember at the beginning of the session when I told you about a minute message? I gave you a story about Alice Dickerber from Villa de Chêne. And I said that I co-hosted a webinar with her last month, and she talked about a 15% enrollment growth at Villa de Chêne School and weight pools and other grades. That was an impact message. I told it to you as an example because I wanted to reference it here later to show you what an impact message is. But that's a story. That's a story about a mission-minded client and the impact that we have been able to have. That's the kind of messages that you want to be telling at this point. You want to be telling people stories about your school where you're creating desire, where they're going, well, I want that. I want that for my student. I want that for my family, and you're creating desire. So the stories that you're telling are very, very carefully chosen because they all demonstrate your school's impact. You don't want to make it a story about just some outstanding student who's the most incredible soccer player that went on to do amazing things in some tournament, because that student likely would have done that at some other school. You want to tell a story about how that happened for that student because of something that's unique to your school. And again, that gets back to that big idea about your school's reason for being. So those are some ways just to think about the storytelling and choosing the stories that you share. Here's a couple I just want to really quickly show for Severn School, again, just because we're connecting that thread. These are two stories, just little quips from alumni. When reflecting upon her time at Severn, Josie recalls being passionate about humanitarian issues and was inspired by her teachers to step up. You know what step up means? It means lead. It means, it means lean in the moment. So that's that theme again, that idea that Severn talked to you about it, their belief message, in that problem message about why those kids needed to know each other's names because connection helped, right, people lead in quiet ways and not so typical ways. So little references like that in a little alumni story about how she remembers being inspired to do that. Or this other story down here about Cherie. She was the first in her immediate family to graduate from college. In her experience at Severn, she recalls the intimate classes and the caring faculty who modeled for her every day what it meant to lead. Now, this, without those two little bolded statements, could be stories from alumni of any school, right? They all have intimate classes. They all remember their favorite Mr. Buckley or whomever it was. They all have small classes and all of those things. But in these two stories, I'm hearing a little bit of uniqueness that ties back to that school's unique idea. So that's what we want for you.
I'm hearing something else too, which I follow a guy named Americus Reed, who's on my board and teaches at Wharton School. And if you're not following him, please do on, all the social channels. And Americus studies identity, both politics and identity marketing. And what we heard in the first story here is the safety of being the biggest nerd. Like, this child was proud to tell you she was the biggest nerd. And that just ladders up to the initial, belief system about you can be you don't have to be on center stage. You can be the biggest nerd here. We celebrate you. And I think that's just, it all fits. And that's a very consistent story that's being told at Severn, right? By alumni, parents, et cetera.
Yep.
Okay, admission days. So you have, the amount of time you have, very often it's maybe a couple hours max, and you need to make every minute count. And it has to be intentional. I could tell some sad stories of when it wasn't intentional during my short admission career, where I put the wrong tour guide with the wrong family, and they basically wanted to run screaming after they went out with Sharon. So be thoughtful about who gets to be part of your tour crew. Train them well, train them on the messaging that will let them tell stories that are authentic, but also unique to your school, right? And collect feedback all the time about parents and families as they're and students as they're going through your tour. If they say, man, I had no idea. I remember one family back in my day said, if my child could turn out like this young man, I'd write you the check right now. And he ended up being the head tour guide, this guy. And I went back in the summer and looked at this young man's tour system data. And he had converted like 98% of the families. He was magic on tour. So I made him walk me around. He was not telling this building, here's what we do. He was telling stories in each building about what happens. That was magical. It was at Westtown School, and in a Quaker way too. So he was making the mission come alive. This is what I want to just underscore here. Your authentic engagement really moves the needle. A very well thought campus tour with the right student makes all the difference. This is what families tell us, right? The shadow and revisit days. I'm aware of different collaboratives around the country that do not allow a revisit day, that they shut that down. And I'm telling you, don't do it. It's, first of all, I think it may be illegal in some states, but more importantly, it's really important to let families come and have a second look, or to reconfirm what they may have seen. Being able to attend a class. Talked about the interview and the word of mouth in the school community. These are all human-centered activities. And I would just underscore with kids in K through 12, this is even more important. At the higher ed world, many people have dropped interviews now. It's less human, right? Especially if they're big schools, but we have the opportunity in these, in real human design, to make these experiences incredible. And remember, you only have a short amount of time. People have consumed and been part of your ecosystem online, but make it every minute be valuable. And this just gives you a clarity around when students enrolled, what moved the needle for them. You can see on campus, activities almost always were important to them, and help them make the commitment to enroll. So do not drop those. And for sure, think really seriously about revisit and shadow days, because that mattered to a significant portion of families who were looking at the end. Again, here's the percentage of schools that were hosting these days, and then respondents who said it really changed their decision of their top choice. So if you have the bandwidth to do that work, I would tell you, please include that as an option for families, especially if they're making a big financial commitment. It's a gracious thing to do. So again, open houses, events on campus are really helpful for people to come and pick up and see what you tell the story on your website, see what's happening really. And authentic should never be an excuse for a lack of planning. That means be intentional about creating the experiences that will allow someone in a short amount of time to understand the very best of your institution. Plan deeply and perfectly in this space, because you only have a short amount of time. And I think we all probably have stories that didn't go well, and we know why. But if you can find the right tour guides, et cetera, to match the right families, I mean, it is magic when a tour comes back and you know that the family's hooked. And this all connects to the brand identity of your school, that you're doing this in authentic ways that fit what you were saying on your website and all your marketing materials.
That may be my favorite quote about authentic is not an excuse for lack of planning. That's a good one.
Right.
All right, so we're now at the action phase. We're in love with this family. We're in love with the student. We've offered them admission, or we're getting close to, and thinking about the message structure and what you're going to be saying and doing from a brand standpoint in the action phase. Our goal here is we're really hoping that families that we're offering enrollment to are as excited about us as we are about them. And so your admit packets and your offer letters need to celebrate the school's identity and, of course, who the student is. I'm going to leave that piece to Heather, but my angle on this is make sure even in the admit letter that we don't take anything for granted, because remember, they're getting other admit letters from other great schools too. And you have to assume those schools are doing all the things that we're teaching here in terms of staying on brand and really, really making sure that every minute and every experience counts. So reinforcing the emotional appeal. This is really where you start to see these people as members of your community, and you're starting to reinforce that emotional appeal of what it would feel like to belong at your school. And you really want to ensure that your materials continue that brand experience. Now we're talking about welcome kits and swag and all of the things that are happening once they enroll. Just moving down this message structure again, now is the point where the details matter. This is the time when families are creating spreadsheets. If you're anything like me, you've got some crazy thing you've built with all the schools you're looking at and all of, and how does this one do on this and that? And they really are looking at your features now. And so here's a point to just continue that brand story through every one of your features. This shouldn't be a checklist like, yes, they have a gym. Yes, they have STEM. Yes, they have this, that, and the other. But it's like, why do they do those things? And tell me a little bit more about them. So detail messages continue to be an opportunity to reinforce your school's brand. Here's two for Severn School. One is about their lower school media center. And just notice that this doesn't say we have this many books in our lower school library, and students come every morning from whatever 9 to 10 and they get quiet reading time. But this talks about what's going on and why it's important that the students spend time in this media center and what they're reading and what they're seeing and how they're learning about their identities in the things that they're reading and the things that they're looking at. In the upper school service learning detailed description, we're talking about engaging with people in communities and having an impact and advocating for causes, right? These are the things that go into the ingredients of creating leaders and graduating young people who are going to go on and lead, but who look very different from one leader to the next. So continuing to just the diligent or vigilance is maybe the word I'm looking for, like continuing that thread through every single detail message could not serve you better at this time. This is the point where make or break. There could be something that appealed to them about another description that another school gave. So don't take your foot off the gas when you're doing things like this.
This is absolutely a time to go personal, to do a personal follow-up by phone, by letter, whatever. This is the time to demonstrate that you are different than the free offer down the road. And I would also say, I'm going to put a call out here, even as we've talked about how important it is to show up and be unique through the whole process. I would like to say that I'm a deep believer in common applications because the process has become ridiculous for admission to our schools. And talk about spreadsheets. I had someone on my staff applying to 3 schools, and she gave up and actually hired someone to help her do it because it was that bad. So I'm a big believer that common applications should be part of our community in the future. I hope you participate. Some local consortiums have them. Know that you need to keep tracking data all the way through to see where your particular school may be missing a mark or really excelling. And make sure you attend to those issues. If you continuously see, for instance, in the post admission offer, where folks who don't accept you decide to get out, we would see at Westtown School, for instance, constant feedback about our athletic program. It made me insane. We had a great program. We had a particularly good soccer program, but the view was the school down the street was much better. And so I said, finally, to the PR team, can we get something out in the newsletters and in the newspaper every now and again? In 1 year's time, that dropped off the list of the top 5 because we started messaging about it and messaging about what we were doing. So sometimes you're going to find things that aren't correct that you can fix. But know that you've got to keep tracking that information to tighten and have a better experience overall. Understand at the end, tuition is always going to be a barrier, even for wealthy families. We all know the very wealthy families who can probably write 2 tuition checks to us, but don't believe they can, and know that that's something that's percolating. Right now, EMA is doing some work on affordability and perceived value. We've talked to over 900 families. That report is coming out. But know that this issue of willingness to pay versus ability to pay is in constant conflict. And so what Romayne was telling you, the importance of having a really beautifully designed system from the start to finish does let you be distinguished in the market. And hopefully, as you're talking about affordability, that there's a perceived value there that is well worth it in the minds of families who can write the checks. And for those who need aid, you're working with them too to help them figure their way and how they can be part of the community as well. See, this is what I just wanted to point out. Different parts of the process, things start percolating differently. And you can see affordability definitely rises when you're making a decision about where to enroll. By the way, some of the early research from our latest study on this perceived value and affordability, it is not about the actual price tag. It's about the quality of the program. So this is going to be an interesting conversation. We've seen a number of schools take a discount approach to their tuition, to try to drop their tuition to gain more market share. And I think it's worked for some schools. But basically, most families are telling us we are willing to pay a higher price if we perceive the quality to be exceptional. We'll pay more for exceptional quality in our minds. So important for that to show up too. Tuition is a significant barrier, and people say that, and these are people from all income streams. So know that, again, the willingness to part with that money, even if you're wealthy, is a consideration. Our process for financial aid is also somewhat confusing to families. We make them a file and then wait for several months, and it's separate from the admission decision. It's very confusing. They just want to know if they can afford, if they would qualify, and yet they have to wait and sit through a process that makes no sense to them. And again, back to that willingness versus inability to pay. There's two different things. And telling that clearly and explaining that clearly from the get-go in ways that parents can understand is going to be a win for any school, because I think it's important to say we seek to, serve families of all income brackets, but we have to operate a balanced business as well. And giving more information, I'm aware of one of my member schools that was having problems with this, and she decided to put a scattergram out to say the last 5 years of families and their incomes and how many people got awards in each category, which helped her manage the conversation differently. It was a little bit more information that helped people understand what the school was able to do.
Thank you, Heather. This concludes our walk down the funnel together. It has been so great to be with you. I just wanted, for those of you who are on this webinar and have an interest in our November webinar at Mission Minded, is going to be a deeper dive into the brand messaging framework. The session is called Strengthen Your Enrollment with Bold Messaging, and that's going to be on November 19th. Please come and join. It's going to be myself and my incredible colleague, Tia Robinson, walking you through a minute message model. And our goal is that you could sign off at the bottom of the hour or top of the hour, whatever that is, with a couple drafts of maybe a belief message for your school, maybe the beginning of a problem message, and some really clear direction about how you're going to go off and create those impact stories and those detailed messages in ways that you can draw them through your process. So hopefully we'll see some of you back then. You can find registration on Mission Minded's website. To that, we'll also send you in your follow-up email from today's webinar an invitation to join that. Heather, any last thoughts or words that you want to say? By the way, we're here for questions if anyone wants to stay on.
Don't miss this. I mean, it's a really fun exercise. It pushes you. I mean, I can't tell you how many drafts I went through to try to do the minute message. And then when I heard other people's minute messages, it was exciting because some of their ideas were far better than mine. And we started working together to think about what was the right combination of words and messages. So I would say try to make time for this, and also make time for our financial aid symposium that's coming up in November at EMA. We hope to see you there, where we're going to be talking a lot about these issues related to access and families' willingness versus inability to pay, and some of the financial trends, the aid trends that are out there right now. Thank you, Mark, for popping that in the chat. Yeah.
A couple questions about getting a recording. Yes, we're going to share a recording of this for anybody who wasn't able to be here. Please watch it and share it with anybody you think it would be valuable to. If anyone wants to stick around and ask some other questions in the Q&A, I'm available. I think Heather is for a little bit of time. Thank you so much, Heather, for being with us. I just see a note in the chat about America's Read. His book is expensive, I agree, but you can get him free on social, and he's really good there. He's got a very funny, short video series that you can get little clips of. So at least do a link with him on social so you can see some of his thoughts about identity marketing. Yeah. Great. And then Mark dropped the link to the EMA Financial Aid Symposium into the chat. Yeah. So if you want to go grab that and make sure. And yeah, thank you so much, Heather. This was so fun doing this with you. Cannot imagine having a better expert to do this with and ping pong back.
Like I blinked my eyes and it was over. We have so much more to share. I guess my final closing words to all of you when I think about America's Read, the power of inviting someone to be part of your brand and your value system is remarkable. And distinguishing that, of course, initially on your website and in ways that people first begin to consume you. But you really are making the offer to them to join your clan, your community. And the more that they can see themselves reflected and their desires reflected in what you offer, the stronger that bond will be.
Thanks for that. All right, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for being with us. It's been wonderful and hope to see you at the next one. Thanks again, Heather.
Thanks, everyone.